And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a game that was originally on Kickstarter and is now out to wider distribution. That game is The New Science, a game for anywhere from 2 to 5 players, and has a theme that is near and dear to my heart: the researching, experimentation, and publication of scientific discoveries. This is one I'm excited about simply because of the theme. So real quick, why don't we take a look at what you get inside of the box and how the game plays, and then we'll come back here and I'll give you my opinion of The New Science at the end. So here you can see the components for The New Science. Now in this game, each player represents a scientist. For example here, the player that's going to be the first player is Johann Kepler. Now each of these characters has their own unique layout on their board here. You'll see it here. Each player is going to have 3 cubes. I'm going to take these off to show this off easier. And then they're going to have some attributes here. For example, this person starts with 1 religious influence. So on the board there's tracks for different types of influence: government, religion, enterprise, and science. He starts with 1 religion, which will be important for the publication of various different types of scientific papers throughout the game. In addition, they have some traits here. They have traits for research, they have traits for experimentation, and traits for publication. So Kepler here is not a very good researcher. He's a pretty good experimenter and publisher. So that's all of the information on here. In addition, you have space for 1 laboratory card, which is going to be something that modifies how the game plays for you throughout the game. And then you have all of the information down here at the bottom about researching, experimenting, and publishing various different types of experiments out here on the board. Now each player is different. Kepler has all of that, although Kircher here has pretty good research and an excellent publication, but he's not so good in the experimentation area, and he starts with a couple of religious influence instead of just 1. Or you have other scientists in this game like Gottfried Leibniz or Isaac Newton. So each of these are going to be, their own kind of specialized player who has a little bit of a different advantage in each different area. Now on the board here, you'll see a different layout. There's several different tracks here. First we have a turn order track, and the turn order is specified by which scientist you are at the start of the game and changes throughout the game based on an action you can take. There is the rest track, which is basically extra points of stuff that you can use throughout the game to boost your research or to boost your publication skill throughout the game. And then you have your different influences: government, religion, enterprise, and science, that you're going to need in order to publish various papers. Finally, you have a prestige track down here at the bottom, which is, of course, your victory points. Now this is a worker placement game, or an action-taking game, in which each player has 3 actions a turn. You'll see we have 3 cubes here, and each player will have 3 of these cubes. In order to do stuff in the game, you're going to need to take these actions, and all the actions are really going to affect things that are going to happen out here in the center area of the board. Now along the bottom of this board here, you'll see we have several different types of discoveries. We have the microscope, we have chemical equations, we have the law of attraction and astrological science, and we have logarithms, and these are all of the base discoveries you can make in the game. And in order to accomplish each of these, you'll see at the bottom it requires 1 research. We'll get into what this means in a moment. It requires then, after you've researched it, that you get 5, or if you're the second person to do it, 4 experimentation value. And that's going to be assisted by a roll of a die. And then after you've got the research, you can go ahead and publish it, but you don't have to. If you decide to publish it, it'll be worth victory points, 2 here, but you're going to need 1 science influence, and you're going to need 1 publication value. And this will vary for other ones. Here you need 1 religion influence and 1 publication, or here you need 1 government and 1 publication. And these 2 both require religion. So depending on what you want to research and what you want to publish, you're going to need different types of influence in the game. Now, instead of publishing and instead of getting victory points, you can move ahead and work on the next thing without publishing your data. And that'll jump you up here to Rudolphine tablets. So this will allow you to work on this without giving everybody else knowledge of what you've done previously. And that's what publishing does, is when you publish something, everybody else automatically gets knowledge of it and can start working on higher up things. But if you refuse to publish it, only you or somebody else who has researched it and experimented on it can move up and work on the next thing in order to try and publish that. And you'll see as you go up, things can be worth more victory points. So maybe by bypassing these 2 victory points, you can get up here to these 6 victory points first. But you're going to need to get some enterprise influence first, and a lot more publication and research. So, how do you get these things? Well, you're going to do that over here by placing actions. And you'll see you'll have these cubes, and in turn order, 1 at a time, you're going to place action cubes out on the board. And these action cubes can be placed on various different things. We have a rest track over here. And when you place on this rest track, later you'll get to resolve this. You'll go up 1 on rest over here. More about that in a minute. and it will allow you to choose your position in turn order. Basically, this is going to set the new turn order for the next turn. If you place on here, you'll advance to that position in the turn order. If you don't place on there, of course, you're going to stay in your same spot or get pushed back by someone else. So that's what these spots here do. These two cards out here are these laboratory cards, and you can only have one of these at a time in the game, but when you get them, they're going to do various things. So, for example, this one is a keep card, and so is this one. When you take them, it's going to be plus two to your experiment in chemistry, and these are kind of color-coded, but you'll see here it's kind of a pinkish color, kind of a tannish pink, and that corresponds to these experiments out here. So if you get this card, you may want to focus on working on experimentation in chemistry because you're going to have a bonus to it until you get rid of this card. This one right here says when another player successfully experiments on a discovery that you have already researched on. So if you and somebody else are both working on logarithms and you've researched it and they have also researched it, they decide to experiment ahead of you. When they successfully do so, you may discard this card and steal that experimentation data from them, meaning that you move up on this track instead. So as you experiment or research something, you'll put a cube out on the discovery. So let's say I've successfully researched this. Let's say also that red had successfully researched it. When they decide to experiment and they roll their die and they add whatever their modifiers are, let's say they needed a 5 and they start with a base of 1 and they got 4, they would of course move up. But instead of doing that, I can discard this card from my board and move up instead of them, which of course gives me an advantage because now I can beat them to publishing it. So those are two examples of cards, but several other cards are in this thing here. This one is +1 to your research and experimentation in biology, or +1 in chemistry to your research, to your biology and chemistry. This one here is one that you play it when you need to use it. It says place your discovery markers on the experiment area of levels 1 and 2 biology. So you automatically experiment on those just by getting this card. So keeping an eye on those is going to be important, and you can place one of your guys there in order to take a card. These next areas here open up depending on how many players there are. For this top row is visible or usable in any number of player game, a 2, 3, or 4 player game, or a 5 player game. Whereas the bottom row is only usable in a 4 or 5 player game. But basically you place your markers on here and that will allow you to increase your influence, which you'll need for publishing various different discoveries. These next ones down here are going to be what you use to do your researching, your experimentation, and your publishing. And depending on the number of players, more or less of these rows and columns will be open, but the top 2 are always open and then more open as you go throughout the game, 3, 4, and 5 player games. When you place on these, you're going to be able to, for example, research. And this one will give you +1 to your research when you do so. So placing on here is 1 for placing there, and +1 bonus for being the first person to research. You're well prepared. And that would automatically give you a 2 research, which says you can research any of these. Or if you've already researched these, you can start going up to here. This one's a 2. This one is a 3, so you'd actually need an extra point. But you'll see that you start with some, and your character may have some more. For example, we have Kircher here that has +1 research. So you may have more or less depending on what your specialties are. Placing on experimentation is going to let you move from the research to the experimentation if you can get enough. Placing there is worth 1 point, and you get whatever's on your board as well. But then you have to roll this die, and this is where some of the chance comes into play. If I have 1 and then I have a 0 in your experimentation, I'm going to need a 4 in order to advance. I got it, so I'm going to go up. But if I roll a 1, I automatically fail, and if I rolled anything less than a 4, I would have failed as well and stayed where I was. Publishing is going to be the way that you get victory points. So once you've experimented, you can publish data or you can move on without doing so. But once you do publish, you're going to get those victory points. And in order to publish, you need as much publishing as shown on the invention here. So you'll see that 1 publishing for the lower ones, but as you move up, it becomes 2, 3, 3, and 3 all the way up here at the top. You're also going to need to develop your influence. If you don't have enough religious influence, you can't publish on things like chemical drugs or the laws of motion. But you also can't publish the laws of motion if you don't have enough science influence. So you need to gather the right influence for what you're trying to do. As you move up, you also need to pay attention to the prerequisites for researching certain things. For example, in order to research analytic geometry or the probability theory, you must have at least 1 of 2 of heliocentrism and planetary motion, as well as having Rudolphine tablets. So you must have 1 of these 2 over here, and this one, in order to research anything from this box. And likewise, you have to have something from here to research up here to tangent inverse. So basically, tangents and inverses, sorry. So basically, you need to make sure you're researching the right stuff in order to get to the top. And of course, you're racing to these top things in order to try and get the most victory points. Basically, you're going to be taking these actions, and as you place on them, you won't resolve them as you place there, but once you're done placing, you'll resolve top to bottom, left to right, and you will then take all of the actions as you go, researching, doing the appropriate experimentation, and publishing in order to get victory points. And the player that best does this will be the winner. Now, one thing I didn't cover is this rest. In situations where you roll too low, or for example, you don't have enough research or enough publication, you can use some of your rest moving down on this track, for example, to increase the number of points you have in that thing. So if you need 3 research and you only have 2, you can move down 1 on your rest, and that will give you the 3 research that you need. So this is a way to kind of buffer the die rolls as long as you don't roll a 1 and automatically fail. So you can kind of store up on that, and as you take the rest action, changing the turn order and storing up some rest, you can kind of have a little bit of a fail-safe if you tend to roll poorly. Anyhow, by best getting the things you need here, getting the points out here, to each player who ends up highest on each of these different influence tracks, you'll get 2 points, and for the person that publishes the most, you'll get 3 points, and whoever gets the most points in the game, and by those 2 means, will be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is the new science from Conquistador Games. This is a game, as I said at the beginning, that I was pretty excited about simply because of the theme, and gladly it did not disappoint. Although this is a medium to lighter weight game, it's definitely a very Euro-y game, and of course it has a theme that a lot of people would probably consider dry, but I find quite interesting, and at the very least is unique. There's not a whole lot of scientific discovery games out there on the market, especially ones with a serious theme rather than like a mad scientist theme or something like that. So I was excited to see that. In terms of gameplay, everything makes a lot of sense. It's very thematic. You first have to research, and then you have to take that research and experiment on it. And then if you're in the scientific community, you know, well, sometimes I don't want to publish this data. Maybe I want to sit on it for a while, and sitting on it will allow me to research the next thing. And then once I've got a good grasp on the next thing, maybe I'll publish my data in order to, you know, get a little bit of renown in the scientific community. However, if you sit on it for too long, somebody else may jump on it and steal those points from you, or steal that renown from you, and of course you won't be as well, you know, renowned, I guess is the word, I'm going to reuse it, in the scientific community because somebody else beat you to it. But you do have that advantage on the next thing. So that's all very thematic. The game ends, I didn't say this, but the game ends either when all of the level 5, the highest level publications have been published, or when that deck of extra discovery or laboratory cards is exhausted, and then the next turn the game would end. And whoever gets the most points through publishing will be the winner. So it's all very thematic, it fits very well, it flows very well, and only has that little bit of randomness in it from the die, which you can counteract a little bit by resting and taking the first player or a different position in player order. So with all of that said, I would definitely suggest checking this out, especially if you're like a medium to lightweight gamer, you like a Euro game but you don't want something with too much complexity, and you like an interesting theme.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.